All right, so then it's my unique pleasure and honor to introduce our keynote speaker today, Professor Gillian Hadfield. Professor Hadfield is the Richard L. and Antoinette Kirtland Professor of Law and Professor of Economics at the University of Southern California. She studies the design of legal and dispute resolution systems in advanced and developing markets. And the markets for lawyers and dispute resolution, and regulation of legal markets and the legal profession. She is director of USC's Center for Law and Social Sciences, and among other things, she teaches legal design. Professor Hadfield is a prolific author. Her recent publications include Rules for a Flat World, Why Humans Invented Law and How to Reinvent It for a Complex Global Economy, but also How to Regulate Legal Services to Promote Access, Innovation, and the Quality of Lawyering, and Innovating to Improve Access, Changing the Way Courts Regulate Legal Markets. Professor Hadfield holds her undergrad degree from Queen's University, JD from this great law school, and also an MA and PhD in economics from this university. And after law school, she clerked for Judge Patricia Walt on the U.S. Court of Appeals, the D.C. Circuit. So, in short, I can't think of anyone better to kick off our conference, and please join me in welcoming Professor Hadfield.
So this is the title of the talk, which is also the title of the book, is the premise is that law needs reinventing. So why don't we start there? And is this working? Yes. So does law need reinventing? We're going to see a lot of talks. The room is filled with inventors, entrepreneurs, people who are rethinking how we do our legal systems. And there's a lot of really exciting work going on, and Codex has played not a small part in instigating that over the last several years. But I'm not an entrepreneur, and I'm not a researcher. I'm not an investor. I am a researcher, and I'm impatient. And I think my task today is to try to get us thinking just a little bit bigger, or maybe a lot bigger, about what it is that we need to be working on, and soon, to address the really big challenges that we face. I think the key point I want you to take away today, if you think about any big challenge that the world is facing today, law is a fundamental piece of fixing those challenges, and we, I think, need to be focused on how we are going to reinvent those essential legal tools in order to shepherd our societies through the upheavals that we're facing. So many of you have heard me speak before about the problems in our legal systems. There are people at the top of the pyramid who have lots of law available to them. There's lots of people with not so much or any at the bottom of that pyramid. And that pyramid can be either a domestic pyramid, so that the bottom consists of our middle class. Actually, it reaches up into our upper middle class. But it also can be the pyramid, the world. 4 billion people are estimated by the UN to live outside of any rule of law. That's over half the people in the world. Those are the people we're trying to integrate into the global economy. But whether you're at the top of that pyramid or the bottom of that pyramid, here's what I think you're facing with our existing legal infrastructure. It's costly, it's complex in the complicated sense, and it's complex in the complex adaptive systems sense, and it doesn't have the quality we need. Now, I know this upsets lawyers when I say this. It doesn't mean I don't think those are fantastic briefs and arguments and contracts and so on. But if we think about what quality fundamentally is from an economic perspective, quality is, are you solving the problem that your user, your consumer has, or that the public is facing? That's what quality is, and that's where we're not meeting the targets. So here's a little bit thinking about the top of the pyramid. Many of you have seen this picture as Thomson Reuters Peer Monitor for this past year. That's growth in demand for legal services flatlined basically since the recession. And is it because of the recession? No, it hasn't recovered. It hasn't recovered for things that were true before the recession, things that come out in surveys like the BTI surveys of general counsel and large corporations. 70% of whom say they do not recommend their primary law firm. 80% say in the last year they've reduced the work they've sent to those law firms. And 88% of those who say they've reduced the work they've sent to those law firms say it's because they're not getting what they need. It's not responsive to their needs. That's a quality problem. So, that's a part of the picture of what it looks like in our, this is in the elite sector of our legal systems, the best of what we are delivering. And one of the things I did in developing and working on the book was talk to GCs right around here at Google and at Cisco and other places, and these are the messages that they're sending back. But let's go take a look at that bottom end of the pyramid, which a number of you have heard me talk about before. As I mentioned before, there's that 4 billion people without any legal services, without any legal infrastructure to draw on. We got a lot of 80-20 diagrams here. 80% of people, ordinary people, dealing with ordinary but important problems, dealing with problems with child custody, eviction, housing, dealing with the police about notices to appear and arrest warrants. At least 80% of those are doing so without any legal help. I've done a quick back of the envelope calculation. If you wanted to give 1 hour of legal help to the 50% of American households that at any point in time are facing a significant legal problem, just 1 hour of legal help at what I'll be generous and say is you could get a $200 an hour rate for solo small firm practitioners. That's actually low relative to the surveys that are out there. That costs $48 billion. 1 hour per household per problem at the going rate. So if we're thinking that we're funding this with legal aid, we do need lots of legal aid. Please, everybody sign a letter to protect the Legal Services Corporation. This is not the solution. Legal aid is not the solution. Fixing our markets is the solution. The problem is that $200 an hour. Here was some great data that came out from Clio recently. This is based on actual billing data from small and solo practitioners. That's 1 to 12 lawyers. Those are the law firms that are dealing with ordinary people. Again, in 80-20, in an 8-hour day, those lawyers are collecting and taking home money on an hour and a half of work. And that's why they're charging $200 and up an hour, because they've got to get paid something for the day's work. It's basically not per hour, it's per day, but they're collecting it by the hour. I like to call this the 80% tax on legal help, because I think it's entirely attributable to the fact that our bar regulations require those practitioners to operate in very inefficient, that's huge inefficiency. Inefficient structure. So that's a market problem. And I mentioned those 4 billion. So does law need reinventing? Yes, I'll think so. I think so. These facts upset me. As I say, I'm very impatient. I think it's really wrong that we're not doing something about that. And we need to be aiming at these big problems. So I thought maybe in the spirit of innovation, we could listen to some engineers. And let's see if I can actually run that from here. Here we go. This is from a video from Google X a couple of years ago.
The actual moonshot is wonderful, inspirational, poetic, beautiful, involved great technical challenges, genuine heroism. It brought the world together. But think about the Polynesian islander on the dugout canoe, deciding one day they were going to go that way. No one had ever been that way before. No one even knew if there was anything that way before. It was amazing, and it changed the world.
People can set their minds to magical, seemingly impossible ideas, and then through science and technology, bring them to reality. And that then sets other people on fire, that other things that look impossible might be accomplishable.
Galileo is such a hero, in thinking big, and what he represents to me is both curiosity and wonder that humanity had, that pushed him and drove himself to invent and work on the first telescopes that allowed us to see the moon, and here we are.
These aviation pioneers were figuring it out as they went. No one really knew how to build an airplane, right? No one knew how to fly an airplane. It was amazing and crazy and wonderful, and they wanted to explore.
Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there.
There's so many challenges in the world, and And you could feel daunted by that, and sort of oppressed by that, or you kind of say, how might we think differently about this?
Everyone else in the world is working on the next 10%. If you can be the one that delivers that 10 times improvement, you have a chance to really change things.
If you want
Heck? Did we lose it entirely? Oh, an error occurred, no kidding. I think we're sunk, right? Does everybody know how it ends? All right, so anyway, you know where it goes. It tells us that if you're going to solve those big challenges, you're going to have to think really differently about things. That if you only want the 10% change, you can tinker with what you've got. And you get great stuff out of that, and people will invest in that, and Clay Christensen will tell us, and that's what, if we try to sell to existing markets, that's what we will get. But if you're trying to solve the big challenges, you have to go back and start at the beginning. That kind of thinking is what got engineers, how engineers invented things like the World Wide Web, AI and robotics, autonomous vehicles, and unfortunately autonomous weapons, 3D printing, the Hyperloop, gene editing, blockchain, private space travel, it goes on and on. So are you jealous? Yes, we want to be like those engineers. We want to be doing some of these big things. I want us to be thinking big as well, and not just because we want to be like one of the cool kids, but because the challenges that those engineers are addressing are ones that I firmly believe the world cannot actually solve if it doesn't reinvent the way we do law. And I think those of us in the room are the people to be doing that. So we need to be thinking boldly like those engineers. So what are our great challenges? Well, it's no secret, right? The world is beset by what seems like a mounting. The last year has been terribly disorienting from the point of view of the challenges that we face and the way forward. And all of this is taking place in faster, in a complex system where it's very hard for us to think about how to intervene. I don't know how many of you heard about the MacArthur Foundation's recent challenge. They called it the 100 and Change Challenge. The plan was to find one solution, get one team, one solution to solve one problem, and give that group 100 million in order to really make a difference in the world. They have just announced their 8 semi-finalists for the challenge, and they include things like changing how society cares for children in orphanages, eliminating hidden hunger in Africa by fortifying staple crops, eliminating needless blindness in Nepal, Ethiopia, and Ghana. That's the Cataract Project. Providing virtual access to specialized medical care, providing libraries and learners free digital access to 4 million books, improving newborn survival in Africa, educating children displaced by conflict and persecution, eliminating river blindness in Nigeria. Those are big, big problems. But here's what I firmly believe. We focus on the idea that our solutions to problems like that, which if you're in a university, you know that the conversation in universities is about the grand challenges, the wicked problems. You look at any listing of the grand challenges, the great problems. If you had looked on the MacArthur website for what are they didn't actually restrict the area, the fields at all. What do we think of as? We think of the solutions as solutions we find through technology, science, and probably some politics. And we do need science, technology, and politics. But science, technology, and politics are built on a platform of rules, the way we decide how we interact. If you want to think about how are they going to solve the problem of improving orphanages around the world, it's going to involve rules and relationships and transactions about who can do what and who's entitled to what. If you're going to deliver cataract surgery to people in Ethiopia, it's going to depend on how those markets for those services, whether they're funded through nonprofits or not, how they operate. So our rules are going to matter tremendously. All of the things that we build as solutions to our big challenges are built on our platform of rules about how we organize the world. And I call that stuff our legal infrastructure. I don't just mean, I use the term rules, but I don't want you to be thinking just you can do this, you can't do that. Legal infrastructure I use the term infrastructure because I want you to be thinking about this invisible platform that everybody takes for granted, that nobody's paying very much attention to, as partly designed and partly emergent. It's a function of the norms, it's a function of how much it costs to go to law school, it's a function of what lawyers in this room think is acceptable, the path through which ABA changes to the rules will take. All of those things are part of our legal infrastructure, and this is what we say 4 billion people in the world have next to no legal infrastructure on which to build. So if we're going to think about how we're going to solve the big challenges, we too need to start thinking about the things that sound impossible, like these engineers, the Google X engineers. So for us, what are the things that sound impossible, that look impossible? Could anyone trust anyone anywhere in the world and do business with anyone in the world? Could everyone feel safe? Could data be 100% secure? Could everyone enjoy a good standard of living and feel dignified and valued, even if robots are doing all the work? And could everyone feel like they mattered when the rules are being made? We've seen tremendous upheaval around the world and domestically, I think because of problems with that. Could we build robots that learn how to navigate human laws and norms? Because that's where we have to go in a world that has significant amounts of robotics in it. Those are things that for us, we look at them and they say, but they look impossible. But so does providing good, fast internet service to everybody on the globe, and that's part of what people not so far from here are trying to think about how to do. So I want us to be thinking about the huge steps next. Could we invent AI to regulate AI? Effective, inexpensive global relationship, now you're laughing. I bet there's no way to regulate AI without AI. Effective, inexpensive global relationship management tools. A way for small traders in China and India and elsewhere in poor countries to grow on global markets. A way for everyone to reliably ensure that all their claims and disputes are resolved in accordance with law quickly and cheaply, which does not happen for a vast majority of people today. A way for those excluded from globalization's gains to participate and benefit. Those are the things I want to know. Can we think about how to invent those? How are we going to do that? Well, how might we think about this differently? This is Megan Smith from the clip you didn't see. And asked her, tell her, if you're going to solve those problems, you have to start over. And that's why the book starts with thinking about the question of why did humans invent law in the first place? Why do we have it? What is it fundamentally trying to do? I don't want to think about law firms and law schools. I want to think about the fundamentals of why do we have this institution? What is it trying to accomplish? Because I think we need to be thinking about fundamentally different ways to accomplish it. So let me tell you the little story that I tell in the book, and these are clips from a video I have up on my website if you want to see the story again. So where do we start? Why did humans invent law? Well, it has to do with the problem of solving the problem of social order. Because without social order, we don't accomplish anything. What is social order? Social order is you're all sitting there and I'm standing up here talking and we're all managing to make that work. Social order is, and we're figuring out what to do when the video won't play. Social order is I'm spending my time, my pointy-headed time, thinking about things like this. You're spending your time thinking about how to actually build something or how to teach people in other fields. And we're all able to engage in transactions that support those specialized investment. And every society needs rules. It's really fundamental. Even animal societies, other animal societies need rules. It's just that their rules are written into their DNA. All right? So the way they coordinate who gets access to the resources is that they got rules in their DNA that control who gets to eat first and who eats whom. But humans come along, and it's one of the key things that humans do. Humans have got cognition, advanced cognition, we've got big brains, we've got all kinds of things, but one of the other things we have that's really critical, I don't think we pay enough attention to, is we invented the whole idea of rules and the capacity for rules. And that begins with social norms, organic norms embedded in our culture. And what's great about culture is it's a lot more adaptable than DNA. So that when the community changes, when the environment changes, new people come in, some people die off, we gain new knowledge, somebody invents a new machine or a new tool, we have a way of our rules of interaction changing. We might have a rule as early hunter-gatherer societies did. If you're at the camp, at dinner time, you eat. Doesn't matter who you are or what you did today. Everybody eats. I also have some norms that say, and if you're sitting around too much under the tree, we may not want to deal with you as much. You may get ostracized from the community. We're enforcing that way. Well, what if sitting under the tree one day turns into supervising people who have learned how to make the bows that you've perfected? Because now you've invented this new tool and you can actually teach it to others and oversee it. Is that sitting around? Should you be ostracized or should we have a new rule? Culture can adapt to that. And with that capacity for flexible norms that could adjust to different environments, human societies grew increasingly more complex. That's the whole process of the division of labor and specialization. People become, we engage in more complex transactions, we become more different from each other, we get more complex societies. But the platform that we build in culture has its own limits built into it. Because we get more, we're building out a platform, it can get us to another level of complexity, but it hits its limits, and we need to change it again. And my view is that that's when we invented law. We don't exactly know when we invented law, but by the time we have writing, we have things that are clearly representing law. Hammurabi's Code, the contract scratched in clay tablets. So this is, 2000, 3000 BC. We get law, and what's really important about law is the capacity to change the rules deliberately. To go to bed one day with one set of rules and wake up in the morning with a different set because we decided our rules needed to change. And that's a huge increase in our capacity for adaptation. And that's what's essential about law, is it's a way of putting together our rules and flexibly so that we can continue to accommodate constant change. So when you look at the world like that, the process of human progress has looked like this one of increasing levels of complexity, increasing specialization, the division of labor, and the emergence and elaboration of law, and the invention of different ways of delivering law. We have societies that delivered it through religion, societies that delivered it through dynasties, monarchies, aristocracies. We eventually make our way to the legal infrastructure of the democratic nation state, which is what everybody in this room probably starts off thinking when we're talking about law. That's what we're talking about. The legislatures, Supreme Courts, lawyers, bar associations. But that's a really recent invention. That's a couple of 100 years old, and it's worked fantastically to build the platform for the mass manufacturing economy, the 20th century economy. But some of you may have seen this picture on the internet before, right? Here's where we are today. It's going straight up. And we can't continue to expect a system that was built to serve well the nature of the mass manufacturing economy to respond to the speed, the complexity, and complexity again in that complex systems sense of the modern world. So that's why I think we really need to be thinking about reinventing and asking the question about how can we reinvent legal infrastructure to support the solutions that we need to all those other great challenges. Again, I want to emphasize, I don't think we're solving those other big problems until we solve this one. And we need to be devoting as much time and energy and resources to solving this one as we're solving. And it's a huge blind spot. So how do you reinvent that legal infrastructure? Well, it's about innovation. We need new ideas. What is innovation? Innovation is new ways of solving problems. How do we solve problems? Well, there are three key ingredients I like to emphasize for the innovative process, all of which, unfortunately, we basically we strangle in the crib in the legal profession. Number one is diversity. People thinking differently with different ideas, different approaches, different mindsets, different pieces of data. I bet you, how many of us in the room are lawyers? Yeah, that's usually what it looks like, something like that. So we need a lot more people who are not lawyers thinking about exactly this set of, Dan, you are a lawyer. You told me you're a lawyer. You gotta admit it. You need diversity, lots of different ideas. Scotty Page, complex system theorist at the University of Michigan, has a fantastic book called The Difference, and a lot of other wonderful books as well. And he's proved it mathematically that you get more ideas from a diverse group than you do from any single smart individual. And it's because of the different heuristics and ways of carving up the problem and thinking about it. What else do we need? We need feedback. You need to know how well your possible solution is working for the people it needs to work for. And again, in law, we tend to be very cut off from that kind of feedback. We talk to other lawyers, we sell our solutions to other lawyers, and we get very little feedback, partly because a lot of people can't even get access to our services, and partly because we've defined it to be outside of markets. And we need risk-taking. We need risk-taking, we need capital that's willing to take risks, and we need people that are willing to take risks on new things, trying new things out, because as you know, the vast majority of them would fail. It wouldn't be a hard problem if the vast majority of things that we tried didn't fail. You got to be ready to fail repeatedly, and again, law is not well designed for this. You can't get venture capital into it. You can't get other people who are more interested in taking risks. And I don't believe our law students are not risk takers when they arrive, but I think we convert them into people who survive in an environment that doesn't take risks. I have lots of very risk-taking students, but we kind of beat it out of them. So we hope not to. Okay, so this is why I'm a fan of markets. I am not a fan of markets for ideological reasons. I've never been a fan of markets for ideological reasons. I've always been a fan of markets because you have great problem-solving engines. They get out there and they find stuff out. They search it out. They incentivize finding out the information. They incentivize solving that problem and thinking up new ways of doing things. And so I think we need to figure out how to get a lot more market energy into the process of reinventing legal infrastructure. I'm not going to do it sitting in my office writing books. Lawyers are not going to do it sitting around a conference table coming up with a set of rules. Bar associations are not going to do it sitting around a hearing room and arguing about whether to change the advertising rules this way or that way, which they should do. But we need to figure out how we're going to solve these problems to get a lot more people. We need markets for legal services. And it just takes too long to say goods and services, technology. We need more of that delivered through markets and not through this incredibly closed market that we currently have that has tremendous limits on who can participate, how you can fund, what kind of business model you can pursue. We need to blow that up. We also need to be thinking about markets for rules and regulations, rules and regulatory systems, technology. Here I want to be very expansive about the concept of rules and regulatory technology. Again, we think of it as we've got a set of rules written down in a rule book, maybe digitized, but nonetheless, it's there in the rule book. We adjudicate, we penalize, and so on. Well, what about regulatory systems that look more like biological regulatory systems? Going back to that AI and the AI automated vehicles, I think until we're figuring out regulatory systems that look different than what we've experienced to date, we're going to be facing trouble. Those need to be competitive markets. Really important to remember this. Lawyers don't like markets for reasons that I don't quite understand. But we're talking about competitive markets, and we're talking about well-regulated markets. There's no such thing as a free market. We shouldn't be going around talking about deregulation. There's no such thing as a free market. Every single market we participate in is supported by tremendous levels of legal structure and regulation, whether it's the basics of contract, property, fraud, intellectual property, antitrust, trade, lots and lots and lots of legal infrastructure and regulation. So we're not talking about unregulated markets. Please don't say that when we think about changing our rules in the profession. Competitive, well-regulated markets. And the reason is that we need to get more money and brains focused on the problem of how do we solve these problems? How do we build better systems that are better at solving the social order problem we face in a rapidly changing, technologically intense world? We need that money and thinking coming from private investors. We also need it coming from social impact investors and philanthropists, the ones who want to solve the river blindness problem or fix the orphanages or deliver digitized books to children around the world. Those investors, those philanthropists also need to be thinking about how are we going to build the platform on which that solution is going to become sustainable and delivered at reasonable cost to people. And we need governments to expend a lot more. Our current governments, they don't spend money on anything, but they want to take away the $400 million, the drop in the bucket, that's the Legal Services Corporation's budget. But it goes where we don't collect data at the federal level. Here's just one little statistic for you. National Science Foundation has a $6 billion budget, and of that, $6 million, 1% goes to legal research. So it's $1 billion for computer science, $1 billion for math and other mathematical sciences, $1 billion for biology, and $6 million for legal. Excel treats that as rounding error, so it's 0%. All right, so what could we have if we, whoops, hang on a second here. What might be possible if we really took seriously the idea of the big challenge of fundamentally remaking the way we do law? So here's some ideas. This is one that actually a student of mine, Oscar, are you here? Did I find you? There he is over there. Oscar, my student at USC, is actually picked up on, why don't we have a phone app that can take a picture of a document? It could be a subpoena, an eviction notice, a collection notice, a contract, a lease, that can take a picture of that, upload it, combination of humans and machines, reads that thing, sends back within, I don't know, seconds, some key pieces of information for the person who's got that document. We don't understand how much people don't know about law, how intimidated people are by law. There's a really nice survey that was done, presented people with cell phone contracts, and said, okay, read this thing. And here it is. Here's the arbitration clause. Then ask them the question. The thing you just read, did it have an arbitration clause in it? Oh, and could you take your claim? It does. Could you take your claim to court if you don't like what an arbitrator does with it? The percentage of people who get both of those answers right, 9%. We don't understand how little people understand, how complicated, how intimidated people are by the stuff that we produce in reams and can fly right through and say, don't worry about it. The only thing you need to know about this is there's a balloon payment. Or, by the way, this is a subpoena. What that means is you must be there at 9 a.m. on May 4th. It doesn't matter if the bus breaks down. It doesn't matter if your kid is sick. And if you're not, you will be locked out of your apartment by the end of the day. Or money will be taken out of your bank account. That kind of information could be done. There's no reason that we're not doing it. Oh, yes, there is a reason. We can't invest in that. We can't pay the technology people a return on inventing that technology. Or how about this, which another group of students of mine at USC are working on. How about a blockchain-based platform on which traders, again, in sort of the China, rural areas of India, can connect with entrepreneurs? What do they face? They face identity problems, communicating their identity. They face a difficulty of gaining a reputation in a massive world for delivering on time, producing quality goods. And they face the fact that they don't have courts, reliable courts to go to enforce their deals, to get paid for their work. So what if we can build that on blockchain? There's a sense in which blockchain actually gets rid of any need to fix those local courts just for the transaction. Is that possible? We should be thinking about how to build that. Down in the left corner here, that's my AI regulating the autonomous vehicles representation with the tools available to me in Prezi. I should have hired Margaret. Margaret could have done a beautiful picture of this. Anyway, so there we got the autonomous vehicles. We got data going directly up to the AI-based regulator, which is doing large-scale data analytics on that material, and then sending, possibly intervening directly back with those algorithms. Remember, autonomous vehicles are going to be part of a huge, complex system. There's going to be weather sensors, traffic sensors, autonomous vehicles, non-autonomous vehicles, traffic design. There's going to be a huge number of interacting parts, and you won't be able to just set a couple of rules to make that work. You're going to need constant data saying, oh, guess what? We know that when this is happening over here, we're about to have trouble over there, and we don't want just a rule being implemented, don't cross the yellow line, stop at the red lights, and so on. We need to intervene directly, perhaps, in those algorithms, or we need to be able to identify faster when those problems are emerging. This last one on the right is something that I'm starting to think about now. The CAPER there stands for Competitive Approved Private Regulators. Because I don't think we can continue to expect that governments in their conventional form will be able to regulate a much more complex, fast-moving environment. We already see the ways in which that is broken down. Some of that is breaking down politically, but it's also just breaking down in terms of the sheer volume of stuff. 2,000-page statutes, 47 different regulators announcing, 10 different regulators announcing 47 different rules to implement one piece of Dodd-Frank, all of those rules referencing each other, huge complex mess to figure out. We're actually headed over the other side of the curve in terms of it. You can have more and more law, you have more and more rule of law. Eventually you're getting less rule of law because we no longer have the social order that it produces, because we don't really know how to predict what will happen. So, and we also are very unlikely to get out of government investment in the kind of new innovative technologies. I don't think government is going to invent that regulatory system for autonomous vehicles. I think that's going to be private industry that invents those regulatory systems. So competitive approved private regulators takes the idea that a private regulator, profit, nonprofit regulator, can develop a system, and the way it becomes licensed to participate in the market, we want to imagine that our regulated entities here, the factories and workplaces, are all required to choose a regulator. Maybe there's a public option and there's a government option as well, but they have to choose one. But they have to choose from one of the approved private regulators. How do the private regulators secure and maintain approval? They achieve the outcomes that have been set by our politically accountable bodies. So that might be the levels of toxicity in water, or it might be the treatment of people in the workplace. So I am starting to think about, okay, could we do this? We've got tons of private regulators already involved in our systems. FINRA is private, ISO is private. What we don't have are competitive approved private regulators, and the system of what I call super regulation, which is regulation of the regulators. And I think that's where we can be going next. So this is what the book is about, and it ends with sort of let's think about taking 5 steps here. Number 1 is change the conversation. When we're talking about those great challenges, every single time we have to be drawing attention to the need to build the legal infrastructure for those solutions. I spend a lot of time now talking with members of the World Economic Forum and hanging out in Dubai with people talking about all the big problems in the world. Everybody's talking about governance. Nobody's talking about law. Nobody's talking about legal infrastructure. There's a fantasy that once you've thought of a wonderful way to improve the markets for staple crops in Africa, man, you've got it. And say, well, no, you don't. They don't have contract law, property law. They don't have those institutions. It doesn't happen. Rule number 2: don't leave it to the lawyers. Sorry, but 1, we're just not likely to do it. We haven't done it, but it's not that we're bad people. We're products of our environment. We're products of the fact that we all went to law school. We learned the same stuff. Everybody read Hamer versus Sidway. I'm a contracts professor. We all read the same stuff. We think the same way. We're required to operate in the same kind of business models. We can't partner up with the technologists and the data analysts and so on unless we just employ them. So don't leave it to lawyers. So that gives us to point 3, which is we got to change the rules. We have to change the rules governing legal markets and legal professions, and we should have changed them yesterday. The UK did, and I hope they are moving fast. But there's all the excitement and energy here. If we could do it here, just think how much more quickly it would go. Number 4 is catalyze and fund research, and I'm thinking there of research in all locations, research in the universities. There's very little money being spent. Our law schools are primarily devoted to training lawyers and doing research on our legal system, reading sets of cases, analyzing what the rules should be. There's very, very little work about what is this thing all about in the first place? How does it work? There's people in cultural anthropology working on the evolution of legal order or social order, people in psychology working on experiments with morality and so on, but very little of this is connected up to what we know at a deep level about the institutions and complexities of legal institutions. We know that. That's our expertise. That needs to be connected up. And we need to be funding that research in the universities and other places. But primarily, and I'll end with this one, it's investing in legal innovation. Particularly if we can do that, change the rules move, we free up the capacity for investing in that. And so that's why I end the book with sort of a call to not just private investors, but also our social impact investors to say, if you really want these solutions, especially if you're focused, as so many are in new philanthropy, on market-based, sustainable, long-term solutions, please put legal infrastructure on the agenda. So I want to end today and say, we're doing something really important. We should be inspired by that, and we should feel very responsible and committed to that. Thanks very much. Do we have time for questions?
Yes.
Okay.
You want to take some
Sure.
questions?
Yeah, you tell me how long, because I actually don't even know what time we started. So. Okay, all right. Does anyone want to ask a question?
I know we're here for the tech, but as a lawyer and kind of trying to cross over into tech, there seems to be and you mentioned right at the end, but there seems to be a morality element, and like until we can impute that into what the technology, it seems like we'll be really facing a big challenge. And where's the place for morality in the practice of law?
Yeah, so I think this is really important, and actually a lot of people in AI are starting to think about this. And I think one of the things that we bring to the table is to recognize that the conversation that's happening around morality really should be a conversation about the legal norms and rules. Because I think there's a misunderstanding that the way our legal systems work, the way the rest of our economies work, is that, we have a set of embedded moral values, and that's what makes our economies work. Trust me. Well, no. What makes our economies work is the fact that we live in an environment that has a very stable contract system, for example. And so most people in this room take seriously their contracts, even though the likelihood of being sued on a contract is very low. Same thing with paying taxes. We just live in an environment where that's just part of our legal culture. And I think that one of the reasons I'm really, this is actually a new direction for me, is that if we're going to build those AI and machine-based systems that are responsive to morality and human norms, we're going to have a way better understanding about how they work. Because it won't just be a matter of, a lot of people in this field like to talk about embedding values in AI. I don't think that's a solution. I don't know what those values should be or how they work. It's not really a question of, should the car run over the school children or kill its driver, which I know kind of everybody's favorite trolley problem to think through. It's a million decisions a day about how far over the yellow line to go, and that's why I say it's a much more complex problem. But the morality is just normative. It's like, is this okay or not okay? Is this what we do or not do? That's a constant.
Thanks very much. Very fascinating, inspirational topics. On the last point about investing, encouraging more investment in legal innovation, a lot of the products of law and markets, I guess, are public goods in a way. So how do we encourage, how do we see return on investment if, these are, public goods and, we're asking sort of private or semi-private actors to get into this space in funding?
So there's lots of things that are getting invented right now that have massive public good benefits. Google, a lot of operating systems. I mean, most of the things, they have spillover effects. The way that we actually are living in a world where a lot of invention is happening, where a big chunk of social networks are basically available for free to everybody. Massive public good quality to that. And as most people in those businesses know, the real trick is figuring out how you get a business model onto that to say, okay, here's how we're going to fund it. But they're generating tons of public value, tons of public good value, and finding creative ways to fund that to extract value as a return for the private investor. So I don't think there's anything different about law from that score. We're living in a world with platforms everywhere, and law is another platform. And we've certainly seen a combination of open source, public, and private, heavily private production works to get us pretty effective platforms. We've got to regulate it. We have to make sure it's headed in the directions that we want it to be. But I don't think there's anything special about law in that sense. Okay.
Hi, yes, fascinating talk. So I guess I have a question about just your thoughts about the kind of incentives and sort of social or market forces that tend to bring one from where we are into a state in which there's some new legal system. So it seems that in the history of the world, typically legal systems, I think that this is a fair characterization, were sort of created by sovereigns. So for example, when you formed the United States, there was essentially a moment in time when common law was adopted and going forth. I mean, a simplification, but it's not something that evolved organically. In the private marketplace, there's certain kinds of dispute resolution techniques have sort of evolved in the context of particular markets. But I would think that that the sort of combination of different financial incentives and social sort of social feedback would tend to drive these things in kind of unpredictable directions in context to the sort of creation by fiat of the sovereign that you see in the kind of classic cases of the civil law or so forth.
Yeah, so I'm going to disagree with your story about history there, and that's part of the story I tell. I spent a fair bit of time in the book talking about history and saying, actually, the world in which law emanated from the sovereign in an organized, top-down fashion is relatively recent. And so if you look at medieval Europe, you have groups deciding they're going to offer legal rules governing a small subset of activities, a large range. You've got medieval guilds, you've got towns, you've got the churches, you've got local leaders, local aristocrats. You have this whole bubbling, and this is actually one of the things I emphasize, that we've lost that competition between different rule systems. You put human beings anywhere, and they have to start coming up with a set of rules. Gold Rush, California, 1849, when the gold rush happens, there's no state there. So they just hold meetings at the mining camps, and every mining camp comes up with a little, here's 5 rules, and we're going to have a jury, and you can have one claim, and you got to stake it out. And medieval Iceland, they get together. You ever lived in a group home, right? Everybody gets together and says, okay, here's our set of rules. A faculty, a company. There's actually lots of energy that people put into building rules. I think one of the things that's happened with our move to the top-down law comes from the sovereign is we kind of squelched all that creativity out of it. And now we just sort of sit around. So if you go, what's a big obstacle to growth in the developing world? Everybody knows it's governance. Those communities are not inventing local solutions for legal infrastructure in the way that Europe did during the medieval period, because everybody says, oh, law, that's that thing that comes out of the legislature that the international community has approved. So I actually think that it's, and that's, so what I'm pressing on is, what do we mean by law? If we define law as what comes out of governments, I think that we're off on the wrong foot to begin with.
Okay, thank you. I think maybe it's our creation story of government starts with Hobbes.
Yes, I know. Hobbes was wrong. Hobbes was wrong.
Thanks for clearing that up.
All right, thanks.